Forward. So hello there today and welcome to today's art class. We're doing a landscape painting today and it's the McDonnell Ranges landscape. I got this picture from a group on Facebook which is called Australian Reference Photos. So if you're ever looking for Aussie photos to paint, landscapes, animals, all sorts, then hop onto Facebook and look for the Australian Reference Photos group and you'll be able to join that. And lots of lovely photographers who are very good upload their photos and let us use those for free. So this one is by Janice Churchwood. So if you've downloaded your video today, then you should have a copy of your notes like this. That includes some words and the pictures that we're painting. You also will have received JPEG images of the picture that we're doing. So you can put those up onto another screen, which I've got here next to me. I've got two computer screens. And so I've got my pictures on one and your faces on the other. So bear with me while I share my screen. I've got my iPad that looks down onto my desk. So you'll be able to see what I'm doing while we talk during the class. So just waiting for that to wake up. There it is. Obviously my light is too bright today. So it just varies depending on the weather and how things are looking. Just trying to see if I can make that work better. Aha, that's better. I think that's better anyway. I don't want it to be too shiny because then you won't be able to see what I'm doing. All right, so that's our notes for today. And we've got focus on there, so that's lovely. And I'll just remove everyone's faces because we don't need to be distracted by looking at all the faces today. So welcome to everyone who's joined me in class today. It's lovely to have you here. This is week 6 of my 6-week course. So we've been doing an online 6-week course and this is our last class. So it's a little bit sad that it's the end, but we'll do another round very soon.
Yay.
Yay. Yeah, I've been asked to keep doing the online, so we're going to have to man up and do that, find some more energy. It'll be good. Because I've also got classes back in the studio in July as well, next month. So for the first part of today's class, we're going to do some charcoal sketching. This is how every class I do rolls. We do the first part in charcoal and we focus on the black and white picture. We also use the grid lines that I've drawn up on the colour version to draw it up and get everything in the right place and get the right perspective and the right shapes, etc. Then we'll look at the black and white and we'll focus on the tones. So you can see in this black and white picture here, it's a lot of mid-tone in the sky. You can see there's a nice range of mids and darks on the rocks on the left. The rocks on the right are a little bit darker. And then we've got some mids and lights and darks through the water there. So being able to see that in your black and white version is really important because it'll help you choose your colours as well as focus on your tone or value. It's called value in America. So if you're used to hearing the word value, that's what they're talking about is tone. So it's literally the blacks and the whites in your painting. So grab yourself a art diary or drawing paper like this. And I'm just going to use a long, thin piece of willow charcoal. And we're going to draw up the proportions or size of our picture. That light is far too bright. I'm just going to turn it off. Didn't help at all, did it really? It's interesting how the different weather does different things to the light. No, that's too much too. All right, we'll just have to roll with it. I'll press a bit harder so you can see what I've done. Okay, so that is the shape of our picture, what they call a thumbnail. And we're going to draw this up using the grid lines. So if you want to use a ruler, you can find your halfway points on the area that you've just drawn. So I just flipped it over to inches, didn't mean to do that, but anyway. So halfway, it's about 5 across and 19, which is about 9.5. So my halfway marks are about there. This part of the class I try to keep fairly loose. So I don't get too caught up in measuring exactly. It's nice to just relax a little bit and enjoy the process and get into art mode before we go on to the color version. So now looking at the color picture first, have a look at each quarter. So what we're going to do is break down the picture into quarters and look at the different shapes inside those quarters. And that helps us get everything in the right place. It also changes your brain so that you're not looking at rocks and sky and water. You're actually looking at shapes and line. So if you look at this top left-hand quarter, cover up the other quarters just to stop distracting yourself from what else is there. And all we've got is this line across here. It's a little bit jagged. It's not a sharp, straight line, but it just comes across there like that. So find where on this grid line the intersection is. So where the rocks intersect with the sky, that little spot there. Find that over here on your line. And I would say it's not quite halfway down, so maybe just a tad above halfway. So I'm going to say it's about there. You can measure it if you want to be precise. I'm doing this by eye. So I'm going to say it intersects to here. And then at the top where it goes off the page, it intersects about there. So if you put those 2 points on your grid, then you can just draw a line down to there like that. It doesn't have to be a super straight line. Just give it a little wiggle so you've got some bumpy bits to indicate the rocks and trees and things that are there. And that's pretty much all that's in that section. And we're just doing outlines at this point. We're not looking at all the details, so just the edges of things. Okay, so that's that bit done. The other way to look at this is to see the negative space, and that's the area of the sky or the background around the thing that we're drawing. So if you're looking at the negative space, you can see there's this really beautiful shape of sky through the top there. So coming across into the right-hand quarter, move that over so I don't distract myself. There's a little bit of rock coming into this half, and then it comes off again. So it comes out and then back in, and again, find where that intersects at about here. So put a little spot there. And then we've got another little area that comes out to here and down. So it's like a little square shape. Comes out to about there, drops down a little bit and down to there. So we can actually join those dots now. So just joining these dots, we've got a little rough edge comes down like that to that section there, sort of curves in a bit more than what I've done. Then it comes out like this and down through to there. So that's the shape of the rock within that area there. And again, you can look at the negative space around it. So you can look at the shape on this side as well as that side. Just really helps to be able to change the way you look at something. And then we can move over onto the right-hand side of this grid. And you can see up here on the top, it's about there is where the rocks begin, just off the edge of the page. And look at the shape of that. It comes down and around and then out to about to there. So if we can find those points, I would say it's about even with where this intersects here. So notice where that little section of rock intersects on the line, and it's about the same height, maybe a tad higher. So we can put a mark at about there for that section. So now try and draw that shape that you see. And again, look at the negative space. So the space or the shape of the sky area. And then we've got to come down on a slight angle, and about where this area dips in here on the left is about the same kind of area over here. It's not quite as deep, but it does have a little curve, and then it comes down like that. So now we can join all those little dots and bring those down, bring that down like that. So that's basically our shapes of our rocks in those two sections. There's some trees and bits and bobs through here. You can do a little squiggle for some trees if you want to. There's another little one poking up there. But that's basically the shape that we want. I'll do that a bit darker so you can see it on the screen. Like that. And I'll come over back here and do this one a bit darker as well. And that one. The light's funny today. It just depends on the weather. It's a sunny, half cloudy day, so changes all the time. All right, so now we've got those two sections done with our outlines. We can now move down into this bottom area, into the bottom right quarter. So now you can see as you come down, the rocks almost intersect, don't they? The one on the right is slightly further behind than the one on the left. If you look at that little section there, there's a slight difference in levels or shapes. So we can bring this down to here. And then it comes across to there. So just moving your charcoal across. And then we've got another bit of rock that oozes out from here. So we didn't put that in earlier, but you could start back up into that quarter. Just bring that shape down like this. In through here. If you've got the picture on the screen, you'll be able to see it a little bit more clearly. And then it's very dark down in there. We can't really see much in there, so it's quite dark. And the lines get a bit lost, don't they? They're like lost edges. So you can kind of make it up and just draw a soft line across there. But down through here is quite dark. But we'll put that in afterwards. Yeah. And then we've got this other section up here. We'll come back up to the top of this bottom right-hand quarter. And this section comes down in a little arc like that, and then across like that. Okay? So that's pretty much all we need to put into there, because the rest is all soft lines. We've got soft water and soft reflection and soft shadow and darkness. So we can come back in and darken and lighten up those areas after once we get all these main areas filled in. So now we can come over into the final quarter. That's the bottom left-hand side. And we're just going to continue the line of these rocks that come across to here. So it's almost straight. There's a few little broken edges with grasses and things in front, but it's almost a straight shoreline there. Okay. And then we have some grasses through here, which start at about halfway, about here, come across like that. And then we've got the other grasses here in the front. So soft little grasses coming through there like that. You can just put those in lightly and softly. We can refine those a little bit more afterwards. Hard to see on my paper. Okay, there we go. So that's our main shapes now drawn onto your page. So you should have something that looks like that. It's really just the outline of the rocks and the shapes that, you know, the negative space of the sky. You can continue those little trees down through here, which are quite lovely. That softens that area there. I can just hear someone, so I'm going to mute. Just going to mute you ladies. So if you do need to ask or something or want me to slow down, please speak up. Don't be afraid to unmute yourself and speak up. Okay, so there we go. That's our basic shape. Now what we're going to start to look at is the black and white picture. We've got everything in the right place because we used the grid lines to work out where they all need to go, where the shapes and the lines and the main outlines of everything sit. So now we can look at the black and white version and start to do a bit of shading. So when I do that sort of thing, I like to pick out, I've got quite a few bits of charcoal here. I like to pick out a piece of charcoal that's a little bit thicker than the one I was just using and quite short, because then I can lie it down flat on my page and shade it like this, do some shading. And you get to fill in a lot more area with a short, fat bit like that. There must be a bump on my page because it's picking up all the lines and things. So if you grab yourself a short, fat, not too fat, but a short, fatter piece, it's easy to hang on to with your fingers. You don't want something that's so small you can't grip. And we're going to start to do a bit of shading, and we'll start at the top in the sky. So you can see up there, there's a little bit of soft cloud. I'm just going to make it all the same shade at the moment with my grey. Notice as it gets down towards the horizon, it goes a little bit lighter. So there's a lighter blue or a lighter tone down there. Once you've got a bit of charcoal on, just give it a little blend with your finger. What that does is it pushes the charcoal in, it smooths it out a little bit, and it helps to create a nice blend of tones. Okay, so we can do something like that, and then where you can see maybe a little bit of shadow, a dark or a light or something slightly different, you can just press a little bit harder to create that variation in the cloud. I'm just going to go and turn off my overhead lights and see if that helps with the screen. It's looking very glary. One moment. Right, that didn't help at all. Oh well. Never mind. Okay, so just varying the shade through there. If you have a look at your black and white version, you can see it's a little bit darker just through here. Could even look a bit stormy if you wanted to darken it up some more. And then it's a bit darker up on the top right section. So just soft little fluffy movements with your short piece of charcoal lying down on its side so that you get a lovely soft sort of mark rather than a hard, sharp mark like you would if you use the tip of it. So we just want to soften through there gently, gently. And again, noticing that down towards the horizon, it's much lighter. So if you've gone a bit too dark, maybe lighten that up a little bit, probably nearly to almost white. And then I can put my trees back in over the top of the light background. So it gets lighter down here towards the horizon area. And then we can just do a few little fluffy movements for trees. Don't worry about being too precise. This part of the exercise is just to study the tone and really look at the darks and the lights. Okay, so if we go over to the rocks on the right, you can see that they're a little bit darker. And that's because they're not catching the light. The light is coming from the right, it looks like to me. That's why all the rocks on the left side, or a lot of the rock on the left side, is lighter and it's catching the light. You can see the edges of all those rocks catching the sun. This side is not because it's in shadow. So it's a bit darker. So we can just darken that off a little bit. Again, with your charcoal on its side, we're not going to worry about doing all the details at this point because we're just really focusing on tone. Vary the tone a little bit. So I'm just going to push that in with my finger like I did for the sky. And then that allows me to come back in with more charcoal and just softly darken off some darker spots. Keep all those little edges quite jagged and bumpy. Because this is rock, it's not smooth and beautiful. So what I'm doing is I'm just zhooshing my charcoal around the page like this and darkening where I can see it's darker. And you can find that when you look at your black and white picture. You'll find all the darks. And there's all sorts of shapes and lines and lumpy and bumpy bits all through there. So just try to get a nice variation of tone through there to sort of suggest that there's rocks. If you were going to finish this in charcoal and do the whole thing, then we would focus much more on more detail. But for now, we just want to make sure that we get a bit of an idea of the tone. I'm just going to rub some of this out because I saw my shape got a bit too big there for a minute. There we go. So just something like that, just like I was doing, just holding the charcoal down on its side flat and zhooshing it around to get a bit of the texture, the idea of the texture through there. Now, as we come forward, we've got this other piece of rock that sits here, and it's very dark towards the base there around the waterline. So we can darken that off, press nice and hard with your charcoal, get that really dark. And then it's got a bit more light sort of on the edges, so it defines that piece of rock from the one in front of it. There's lots of different shapes and things in there. We'll look at those later on. But just for now, we want to focus on getting our tones happening. Okay. And then as you come down at the base of this rock, it's got a bit of a dark curve, and then we've got dark in the water around it. So just darken off that area there. You might want to swish it across with your fingers, go across in horizontal lines. So we try to indicate the feeling of the water. Something like that. So just keep it loose, don't stress too much. This is not the final piece. This is our rehearsal, and we get to practice the picture and get to know it better, so that when we do come around to do the colour version, we'll already have an understanding of the tones and the shapes. Okay, so that's that side. I think we might leave that there for now. Let's go over to the left-hand side and the rocks up there. So if you're looking at those rocks, there's a lot more variation in tone because of the light. And so if we just draw a jagged edge, do the same sort of thing with your charcoal, and just looking at the shapes and the tones and all the tiny little areas of lights and darks you can see there. Where you put dark will give it more shadow. Where you leave it light will give it more brightness. And that indicates the things that are sitting in front or behind each other. And all the different lines and shapes. There's a lot of horizontal line on this side. And that'll be pieces of rock that are just sort of sitting out from each other. So I'm just doing these horizontal sort of shapes with my charcoal on its side. So they're not a hard, sharp line. They're sort of a softer line. And when you press harder, you can get it darker. So just varying the shapes there. And when we do this in colour, we can use a lot of lovely lights like yellows and oranges to get those highlights back in there. And then as you come down towards the bottom here, where it intersects with the water, it's much darker down in there, isn't it? Because that must be in shadow as well. So the rock on the right is casting shadow on this rock on the left, but only on the bottom areas. And then as we go up higher, it's attracting more light. So there's some definite shapes through there that we can focus on afterwards. Just notice that we've got lights and darks through there, all sorts of different shapes, craggy shapes. Rocks take ages to paint, so we're going to keep it quite loose today. If you feel like being more detailed and continuing on after the class to get more information in there, feel free, that's awesome. But we've got to try and fit this into our time frame. Okay, so just a few different shapes and lines through there. Just going to soften off some of it, blur it with my fingers. I don't want a lot of it too light. But just to give the feeling or the impression of the sharpness and the tones and the shapes in there. Okay. So lots and lots of little squiggly marks. Still on the side of the charcoal stick, so I'm not getting too many hard lines as yet. If we were continuing this with charcoal, then you would refine it as you go. Okay, lovely. So that'll do for that bit. We've now got an understanding of how these rocks are sitting and how they're related to each other. And as I said earlier, this one on the right is sitting a little bit back. The water line on that one is further back than this one here on the left. And you can see at the waterline, it gets really dark, doesn't it? So we can darken up down on the base there. Just do a few more squiggles for those little trees that might have got lost as we were carrying on. They're lovely. They kind of soften off that background area a little bit. Okay, and then as we come forward, now we're looking at the water. So the water is running in a horizontal direction, sort of like this. So if you do soft lines like that acrossways, a bit hard to see on my screen. Let's see if I can darken those off a little bit for you. So just doing some soft horizontal lines to represent the ripples in the water. So using your charcoal stick just on its side, lovely soft marks like that. Try to keep them kind of random so they're not all the same length or width. Sort of try to vary it a little bit so that it looks natural like water. And now we can focus on getting some of these shadows and darks into here. So remember over here on the left-hand side, we've got that grass. So the grass is a little bit lighter than the rock in the black and white version. So I can use my eraser and just lighten up a little bit where that grass is going to be. And then there's like a little sandbank, and that's quite light over there, as is the tree on the sandbank. So if you want to get your eraser, unless you've left space for it, you might need to use your eraser just to take some of the charcoal off over here to indicate that tree. Okay, this is all very loose. Don't worry if it's not looking perfect. It's just a practice run. But we're just looking at the tone. So the tone or the lightness of that tree is quite light compared to the rock behind it. And then I'm just going to come back in here with a bit more dark under the tree. So we can't really see all of the tree. It's sort of coming off from the side of the page. A little bit of light through there on the rocks. And then we've got our sandbank or a bit of earth and dirt. And that's got some nice little grasses on it. So just do some sharp little lines using the end of your charcoal stick now, just to make sharp lines like this. So what I'm doing is just little lines like this to indicate grass. There. And then we can darken off on the water line of that as well. So that's quite dark around in there, isn't it? In that water area and up through here. So now we're looking at the tones again in the water. So let's have a look at this. We've got dark tone, which is the reflection of the rocks coming down on the left side. We've got two stripes of those and then one on the right. Okay, so they're all the reflections of the rocks into the water. So we need to put those in first before we put this grass in the front. That'll be the last thing that goes in because it's closest to us. We're going to work from back to front today, or top to bottom pretty much, which is sort of usually how I do a landscape, back to front or top to bottom. So just looking at where those dark areas are in the water, grab your little bit of charcoal and again, keep it on its side and just pull it across like this to get those nice dark tones in there. Okay, so I just want to do that kind of thing to get that lovely shadow happening through there. And you can see I've gone a little bit lighter on the one in the middle or the center one because it's not quite as dark as the one on the left. And there's a couple of little dark spots and then we've got light. So there's wind on this water. It's causing movement and it's making everything kind of shimmer with those beautiful lines through them. Now remember, you can always remove some of the charcoal with your kneadable eraser. So if you go too dark, you can come back and take some of it off. Or you can use your kneadable eraser to get some of your lighter lines in through the water. Okay, so that's gone a bit crooked anyway. So that's that side. And then the same thing on the other side. So this side over here on the right, just going to do a nice big dark area down through there. And then across like that. Gorgeous. So we've kept all this here in the middle quite light. And that's because it's reflecting the sky through those rocks, isn't it? So now we can just, again, do some more little ripply sort of lines through there to indicate the ripples in the water and the movement. Like that. And it kind of softens everything off. And then if you want to put some more light back into the water or even add a few more lighter ripples, grab your kneadable eraser, give it a squeeze and get a nice sharp edge on it. So you've got a bit of an edge that'll draw a line, and then you can use that to come through like this and sort of break up some of that darkness. You'll need to keep kneading it and finding a clean edge because it gets so grubby with the charcoal. It's something you've got to keep kind of cleaning. But that's good. Okay, so this can be used to get those beautiful ripples through there. You can pull it all the way through like that. What if I do that, what I'm doing now is I'm kind of pulling the charcoal around on the page. So it's picking up some charcoal and then putting it back down, and it's kind of just smudging it a little bit and softening all those dark areas off a bit. So that's quite nice. Probably need to be a tad lighter through here. So I can lighten this area up with my kneadable eraser. Like that. And then just soften those lines off. So don't be afraid to use your eraser. It's quite useful when it comes to things like this, when you're trying to get things lighter with charcoal. And through here, in the middle there, that section just through there is very light because that's reflecting the light part of the sky. It's slightly darker up here. So looking at all the tones, it's what we're studying at the moment, is the different tones in black and white. And that's going to help you with your painting because then you can choose what colours you want to use for your tones. For instance, if I wanted to choose a light tone for my rock faces where the sun's hitting it, then I would probably pick up a lovely yellow or a pale lemon colour. And then, you know, if you want to choose colour for all the darks down here at the base of the rocks, I'd probably go for purples better than blacks because there's a lot of purple in there. And your purple and yellows and oranges are really lovely together. So there's all those things to think about and consider while you're, you know, doing this little exercise. What colour would I use there? Doesn't always have to be black or white. It can be other things. And that's the fun part. Okay, and then right here in the foreground, we've got the grasses. So again, use your kneadable eraser, give it a nice little sharp edge like that so you can do these little grassy sort of marks with it. You'll have to keep kneading it to make it clean enough to remove some of the charcoal off the page. So just something like that. I think it's nice to have a little bit of grass or something in the foreground with a scene like this. It just looks lovely because I don't know, it gives you a perspective of where the image is taken from. So we don't want to spend too much more time on that part, but that's essentially how you can get the whites back in to indicate those little grasses, those grassy areas. And you need to have the dark behind it so that the light grasses come forward. And they're very bright, aren't they? Some of these bits of grass are catching the sun and they're actually quite light. So we can have a look at that when we do the colour version. But you've just got to keep kneading that eraser, finding a clean edge. If you press quite hard, you'll get a nice white effect like that. So you can just keep doing that until you've got it looking the way you want it to. Or you can use a charcoal pencil. It doesn't work too well on the white paper, but it might be good enough just to get some white lines back in there. I find it sometimes not white enough, but for this, it's not too bad, actually. That's working okay. So you can use a charcoal white pencil. So next time you're at the art shop, if you don't have one yet, grab yourself a white charcoal. They're really good to use with pastels and with charcoal. And it's also great for drawing up your pictures and doing all sorts of things with. So if you're going to buy a pencil of any description, try to get a white charcoal. Very, very useful. Okay. Well, I think we might now move on to our colour version, pick out some colours and papers and get all that ready to go. So that's our little black and white sketch. As I said, it's just a rough idea of working out where the tones are, where the lights are, where the darks are, and the shapes, so that when we draw it up the second time round, we'll be a little bit more familiar with it, and it'll be a little bit easier to do, because the more often you do something, the easier it gets. Okay, so I'll put this one aside for now, and we'll look at some colours. Oh, I might kick that out actually, so I can put the colours next to it for you to see what I've picked up. Okay, so Karen was asking earlier, how do you choose your colours? I literally grab my picture, hold it over my pastel boxes, and I look for colours in there. So this morning I had the picture and I started at the sky, and I thought, okay, I can see two blues in the sky. I can see a very light blue at the bottom there, and I can see a slightly darker blue up towards the top. And this light blue can also be used for those cloudy little areas there if you want to put clouds in. If you don't want to put clouds in, you can just keep the sky nice and clear. Up to you. So that's how I choose my colours. I literally do that and hold them over and go, yep, that's pretty good. Yep, that'll do. So this is what I've picked up. I've got quite a few here. So I'll probably end up getting some more browns, I think. I haven't quite got enough browns. But basically, I'll put them here. I'll start from the light. So I've got white, which you can't see on the paper. White will come in handy for adding some light into the sky and the water. And then I have a pale blue there. And then I have a darker blue, which is for the sky. So they're my sky colours and water. And I looked at my rocks and I thought, okay, what can I see in there? I can see this reddy brown colour. So that's going to be nice for the darker brown areas. I also grabbed red. I don't know if I'll use it, but sometimes it's nice to mix the two and get a sort of a warmer brown. It's a bit of red. Picked up orange because I can see a really bright orange in there where the sun's catching the rocks. So I thought that would be quite nice to just add a little bit of warmth and brightness. Sometimes rocks like this can get a bit dark and dull. And then I got this apricot colour. So that's sort of a mid-tone that I can see through most of that rock face where it's got some more light on it. So they're my rock colours. And the other one I picked up is the purple. So the purple, dark purple, or blue violet, if that's what you've got. They're both the same. They look the same to me. Maybe the blue violet's slightly darker, but a dark purple, I can see a lot of that in the shadows of the rocks and on the other side, on that dark shadow side. There's a lot of purple through there. So I've got purple for my darks. Lovely. Then I grabbed some greens because there's green in the tree here on the left side. There's some green grass on the left side as well, just on that little sandbank, and over here towards the middle. And then we've got green and a bit of a kind of a weedy plant on the foreground. So I also picked up this colour. I don't know where I'll put that, but I might not put it anywhere, but I quite liked the idea of it anyway. It's an ochre. And then I've just got a couple of greens, and again, they might not be the right ones, but they'll do for a start. So I've got a mid green, and then I've got a lighter green, a limey sort of green, and I've got a dark green, and I've got a darker green. I think that's darker green. Pretty sure that's a green. So they're the colours basically that I've picked out for today's paintings. There's quite a few. But basically you just want to break it into 3 sections. You need sky, rock, and foliage, because the colours we use in the sky and the rock will also be using in the water. So sky, rock, and foliage, basically. So your blues, your browns, and your greens. The other thing I've got here is a little hand towel, which is wet on one end, so I can actually clean my fingers off fairly well and dry them on the other end, and then you can pick up your next pastel and carry on with that. So it's good if you're going from dark to light colours. You don't want to contaminate your blue sky with your purples or something, then you can wipe your fingers nice and clean. So that is the colour palette that I've got so far. As I said, I'll probably end up getting more. There's my eraser. I'll toss that in there as well. I'm going to draw my picture up today with charcoal. I like to use charcoal for my drawing if I can, because it's softer and it's sort of easier to cover or remove. So I'll probably use that bit of charcoal or another bit, depending on what works. And the colour of the paper doesn't terribly matter today because we're going to fill the whole page in. But what I grabbed out of my drawer was this blue. It's kind of a sea greeny blue. I thought that might be quite nice to put this onto. And I think I said in the notes, paper, orange, blue, red or brown. So any of those will be fine because we'll be filling the whole thing up. So it doesn't really matter very much, unless you want to leave some of your paper showing through, in which case choose something that's in the painting. For instance, if you go brown, you might be able to leave some of this unfilled and use the colour of the paper as part of the browns, or blues for your sky, or maybe purples, aubergine, those sorts of colours are lovely too. So whatever you've got in your box will do. And then once I'm ready to go, I will tape my paper down onto my board. So I've got a little board here, got brown paper on it that I can change out when it gets too grubby, and literally got some bits of painter's tape there that I just put that down to hold the corners down. You can tape all the way around it if you like. If you do that, to keep your white frame, because it does look nice at the end of the day when you peel it off and you've got a lovely sharp border, nice and clean and fresh. But just remember, be careful when you peel it, because this paper on the outside doesn't have the Colourfix grit over it, so it's just plain paper, so it will tear if the tape is too sticky. And if you do that, when you pull it off, pull it outwards away from the center. So if I had tape down here, I'd pull it out here towards the right, so that it wouldn't, if it's going to tear, it'll tear away and not in. Because I've done that once before and I learnt the hard way. It tore the whole painting and lifted all of this. So that's really upsetting when you've got something nice that you want to keep or frame.
Can I just say something there? I was having problems with that. And I saw on YouTube where they said to get your tape and just put it on your clothing first to take a lot of that stickiness away.
Yes.
That seems to work quite well when I remember to do it.
Me too.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree, Karen. That is a great thing to do. So as Karen said, and I have talked about that before, I just forgot to mention it. But if you do want it to be less sticky, then just pull your piece of tape out, stick it on your jeans or your jumper or your tablecloth or whatever you've got there. Takes a little bit of the adhesive off, and then it's not too sticky. So that's a really good hint. Thanks, Karen. That's great. Much appreciated. All right, so what we'll do now is we'll have a short break, and I will leave you to sort your colours out, choose your colours and get ready to do the colour version in the next round. If you want to, you can get ready now and start drawing your picture up onto your pastel paper. Use either charcoal or a pastel pencil. Use something that you can see easily on your colour paper. So if you've got a dark paper, you might need a lighter pencil or a white charcoal. and vice versa. So I've got a light paper today, so charcoal will be fine for that. So we might have a little break now, and we'll come back in 10 minutes, and I'll see you then. And that will give you a chance to either get started or have a cup of tea.